So this beret means an incredible amount to me. It's not just a headpiece that I wore. The green beret, since its establishment, is a sign of excellence.
Kirby, you've dedicated a lot of your life to service. What would be your message to the American people? Because there are a lot of people who are struggling with a feeling of hopelessness.
The Army gave me something that I never had before, and that was a home, and to be surrounded by people that I did not have to question whether or not they wanted to be there, and that sense of loyalty. And then that feeds into the patriotism for me. It became about him and not about me. For me, that's what basic training did to me. Yeah. I wish we all could have that transition point where we would, for once in our generation, stop looking at ourselves. And if we would focus on our neighbor and the person next to us, like the soldiers do, and the airmen and the sailors and Marines, you would see, and I think our country would find that level of patriotism that we need to be able to survive.
So how do you come out in support of Israel? I kind of want to understand how you got to that point.
My whole military career, really, I was, if you had asked me if I was pro-Israel or anti, I would have said pro-Israel. They're like us. They believe like us. You know, right. They may not look like I do because they're in a whole different part of the world necessarily, but they believe, they fight, and they die for the very same or similar principles that we believe in America, and that they're worth fighting for. And in my opinion, they have it a lot harder than we do because they're surrounded by people who hate them. We have oceans protecting us. Right. Actually, I have a hat here. So the Operation Good Neighbor, this took place during the Israel and Syrian conflict. To build hospitals on the border of a country that you're actively in a conflict with it's a bold move anyways. But here they are building these hospitals, treating Syrians and radicalists that were trying to kill them, that got injured, that somehow made it back over. And I was like, this is mind-blowing. To value life. Everything about what I learned in Israel is about valuing life. One thing that should never be political is supporting an ally in the Middle East that supports life and human rights, even those rights of the people that would kill them. We need to be funding the Iron Dome and helping protect women and children in the Middle East. Right. Like you don't even have to like Israel, but you should still be on board with protecting women and children from getting blown up by terrorists. Like this is simple stuff.
So let me push back though for a second.
Sure.
There are a significant amount of people who say that in fact our support for Israel makes America less safe. We're 20 years out from 9/11, and there were people at the time who still make the argument that our support for Israel is part of the reason 9/11 happened. So you know, you have a unique insight that most of us don't have. You spent time in the Middle East, you've spent time in Iraq. So how do you respond to that?
If 9/11 happened because we support Israel, that's like saying that, you know, a police officer or a squad of police officers got murdered because they were in a bad neighborhood in Chicago, and therefore we should no longer send police into the bad neighborhoods in Chicago because the cops got shot. It was a tragedy, but Israel is fighting that same enemy that did that to us. You know, so for us, you know, for me, they're an ally. The tie to Israel and America, I believe, is one of the most important political topics we have because it is the one that shows America's commitment to honoring God's people and His land. And I think He's blessed America for blessing Israel. You know, so Israel it's one of those topics that to me needs frontline soldiers. It needs people educating.
So your journey to CUFI, unique, I think is the best way to put it. Especially with you being involved with CUFI on campus. Right. What would you say to those students who are starting college, who have just started getting involved potentially with CUFI on campus and are just under attack from all sides?
I believe that the education system is where we can fix a lot of the problems in America. And this mentality that we're seeing right now where you can't question anything is completely wrong. It's okay to ask the simple, why do you believe that? Based on what evidence are you giving me this conclusion? And you know, the evidence, as far as I'm concerned, shows that Israel is not an aggressor nation. And every opportunity they've ever had, they've chosen peace over land, over money, and it's always been denied. and it's okay to approach those topics. And if somebody gets upset talking about Israel, which happens, now that's an indicator for me as a believer. I know what I'm dealing with. I know that I'm not dealing with someone who is fully informed. So my goal would be to help inform them in a loving way, and that's what CUFI did.
Every week on the CUFI Weekly, I'm going on about how people need to stand with Israel, do something. I think people are sick of hearing me say it. For you, why? For the average American, why should they get involved? Why do they need to get involved?
They're the only democratic nation in the Middle East. When we have a country that has freedom similar to the way that we have it in America, to me it is worth supporting them even if they make mistakes. And having fought in the Middle East for the past 20 years, America should now have a much better understanding of what our ally deals with. And when you look for that and you avoid the mainstream narrative and you look for who's here, who's actually pursuing peace, Israel is always at the negotiating table. And to me, that is why I support them. Supporting freedom is worth everything. It's what our forefathers died for. It's what we tried to emulate. I mean, that's what we tried to do in Iraq and Afghanistan, was build a country just like Israel. We wanted them to have free and open elections. So for me, it's very simple. If you can vote free and fair elections, that's worth all the blood we have to offer, because that's what I want my kids to grow up in.
Thanks for checking out today's episode of CUFI Weekly. If you enjoyed this episode and want to stay up to date with the latest news from the Middle East along with topics involving US-Israel relations, please be sure to like and subscribe, and remember to click that notification button so that you are notified every time a new show is uploaded.